now, it is not being discussed yet in the cabinet.
Ahmad, what do you think? From your vantage point, do you expect that there will be a ground offensive into Gaza? As bad as the situation is there right now, how much worse, how much more dire do things become if there is a ground offensive?
Well, the situation is becoming graver by the hour as Israel, the occupying power, continues its onslaught and unleashing all means of lethal military aggression against the defenseless Palestinian civilian population. The reality is that Israel has the upper hand, and the reality is that the victims are mostly Palestinians. The numbers speak for themselves. The destruction and the widespread violations are being committed by that immoral army that has been occupying a people and denying them their rights for over 57 years now. The reality speaks for itself, and the world is slowly but surely coming to see this reality and seeing Israel for what it is, an occupying power that has a colonial enterprise on the occupied Palestinian territory with apartheid tactics aimed at controlling the population. So Israel, as you have seen by all Israeli officials, they have been speaking, will use, and they excel in once there is violence and carnage, they excel in these times. And we think that things are most probably going to become graver by the hour.
Hillary, I want to pick up on something you were mentioning a few moments back in your previous answer. You were talking about elites in the Democratic Party. You were talking about progressives in the Democratic Party. Of course, there are these progressive voices, a growing chorus of progressive voices in the Democratic Party in the U.S. that have been drawing parallels between the plight of the Palestinians and the injustices faced by Black Americans. Previous generations of Democrats, they did not do that. This was not something that was discussed openly. How big a shift is this in the dynamic of the conversation, even amongst the political elites or the progressives in the party?
I think there is a major shift. I think the two campaigns of Senator Bernie Sanders helped really provide, in a sense, cover for Democrats, even for progressive Jewish Democrats, to really make their voices heard in terms of this kind of what Israel is doing to both its Arab citizens, which is really important and I think shocking for many American Jews last night and this morning, to see these images of how Arab citizens in Israel are being attacked, how their shops are being destroyed, how they're being lynched in the streets. And even though certainly there's a lot of violence being perpetrated as well against Jewish citizens of Israel, these attacks against Arab citizens of Israel is giving further angst in a way to American Jews and to American Democrats writ large. This is not something that historically has been part of the Democratic Party. I think Israel had done a very good job previously in keeping bipartisan support for Israeli politics, which really obscured a lot of what Israel was doing to both its Arab citizens and to the Palestinians. But today, Netanyahu made his bet during the Obama administration. He bet against Obama. He bet with the Republicans, and today he's paying that price. There's real division, real change among the Democrats. We may not see that personally in President Biden himself, but you go one step below that, and there is real profound change. And I think it really does stem from Netanyahu's bet against Barack Obama and with the Republicans.
Danny, we are seeing these horrific scenes play out across many mixed communities, deadly internal unrest in these mixed communities across the country. I want to ask how concerned you are about that, because it's one thing to have a political ceasefire potentially on the horizon. This is something that, once that hatred gets out into the communities and you see this kind of violence, it's much harder to stop, is it not?
I'm very worried about the situation, and everybody should be worried about it. First, I beg to differ with Hillary. What we saw last night, the attack against the innocent Arab, we all condemned it. But 99.9% of the attacks in the last few days came from Arab rioters against innocent Jews. It's not all the Arab population, it's a small minority, but most of the attacks were against innocent Jews in Jerusalem and in other parts of Israel. So we are worried about that because the Arab Israelis are citizens. They enjoy full rights in Israel. We have a Supreme Court justice with Arab Israeli, members of Knesset, hopefully in the future, maybe a minister. And to see those pictures, it's a problem because we believe in coexistence. We cherish what we built here together with the Arab Israelis. And in order to build their future together with us, when they are attacking police forces, schools, nurseries, at the end they are attacking their own people and their own destination. So we should all be worried about it. We should all condemn the violent attacks. And unfortunately, Prime Minister Netanyahu and the president made a quick condemnation, but I haven't heard condemnation coming from the leaders of the Arab society in Israel. They are silent, and that's a cause for worry for us.
Ahmad, what's your response? How concerned are you about this violence that we're seeing in mixed communities that's playing out?
The Arab Palestinians in Israel have been discriminated against since the establishment of Israel, and this is a reality. There are hundreds of laws that discriminate against them, and with the rise of the right-wing Israeli politicians and the settlers taking over the government in Israel, we saw more and more violence and more free hand for the settlers to do whatever they want when it comes to pushing forward their agenda and giving them a free hand to do these things. None of them are held accountable. We saw the Israeli police very keen to attack Arabs when they take to the streets and Palestinians when they take to the streets, but the police was completely absent when Arab properties were attacked and when they are under attack